We understand that it takes community to really solve the issues that our young people are dealing with. And today is going to be around school suspensions and exclusionary discipline. Again, school suspensions and exclusionary discipline. What is the problem in Allegheny County and also in PPS? Who's working to address it? What schools are getting it right? And what you can do as an advocate for our young people. And so it is 2:01. We are going to get this thing started, but please do introduce yourself in the chat. At Gwen's Girls, we are a sanctuary model. And so that means that we ask that you put your name, where you are joining us from, and also a word to describe how you are feeling today. Good and bad are not feeling words. So we need a little bit more of a description. I am feeling very high strung. I've had about 3 cups of coffee. So excuse me if I start with the jitters during the webinar today, but I promise I have the eye of the tiger. I am laser focused. And so let's kick this thing off. I am going to go over to Angel to introduce herself as one of our esteemed panelists for today. We have Angel Gober with us. Angel, tell us where you are joining us from, please.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Angel Gober. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the executive director for 412 Justice. And I am based here in Pittsburgh on the north side in Marshall Shadeland. And the work that we do at 412 Justice and the Education Rights Network, which is a campaign of 412 Justice, is definitely on topic for today. We focus a lot around harsh discipline policies, high levels of suspensions, the lack of supports for kids, students, and children with disabilities, with IEPs, 504 plans. And then we also focus on how do we create models where we actually are implementing services and supports instead of spending resources on over-policing, arrests, issuing citations, school push-out, spoon-feeding children to the school to prison pipeline. So that is the work that we've been focused on for the last 10 years. I have a slideshow. I don't know if that's now. I don't know what you want me to do.
Yep.
Okay.
Go right ahead, Angel.
All right. And I'm going to spend just like a few minutes talking about where we are in Pittsburgh Public Schools around suspensions and some of the data that we have kept up with over time. So I'm going to share my screen. See if I can do this right. Okay, let's see here. All right, let's see. Okay, here we go. All right, let's start from the top. Where's the presenter mode? Present view. Okay, are we good to go? Can you see it? Okay. All right. All right. So this is one of our campaigns. We call it Solutions, Not Suspensions. Some of the work that we've done on suspensions in the past, we've issued many reports highlighting the data on students that have been suspended, short-term, long-term. We keep track of days of missed school. We break it down by, demographics of kids with disabilities, by race, by sex. And so we also were instrumental in passing a suspension ban from pre-K to second grade for nonviolent infractions. They are always coming for our suspension ban. They try and take it back every year when they deal with changes to the code of conduct. So we have to maintain making sure that our kids are not pushed out for small, like childlike behavior. So I'm gonna get right into it. So just year to date, as of this week, if you want to look at last year's suspension rates, we were at 9.4%. This year we're at 10.7%. And we know that like anything over 10% is considered excessive when it comes to suspensions. PPS total unique students are just individual students. Let me move this. The thing is in my way. All right. So year to date, we have 2021, 2022 numbers, and then we have 2022, 2023 numbers. So 1,896 and then 2,100. Okay, why can't I see my little notes? Let me see. Okay. All right, here we go. So Pittsburgh Public Schools total days suspended. So this is just missed time in the classroom. And see if you want to look at 2021 versus 2022, we went from 7,532, and that was up to 7,714. And so we know that if kids miss even one day of instruction, that they can fall behind. So those numbers are pretty alarming. So suspension rates in PBS have increased and students are missing more learning time. This is alarming since we know how much harm out-of-school suspensions can cause students. Out-of-school suspensions do not change the behavior, do not have a real assessment of what's happening with the student. So it is just a tool and an outdated practice that does not work for our students. It does not get to the root of the problem. A lot of the times kids for longer term suspensions or have to go to the SAC. And a lot of times kids don't go because there's transportation barriers. It's way on the other side of town. They're not learning the things that they were learning inside their classroom, and it's just not a good practice. All right, so if we want to break it down by race and gender, so these numbers are the most upsetting. If you look at female African-American students, we are up 13.1%. If you look at male African-American students, we're up to 18%. And so the amount of Black female students compared to white female students is like astronomical, right? So clearly race is an issue in our public school system. And our kids, the kids that look like me and my daughter and my family are the ones that are being pushed out at the highest rates. Okay, so PBS, this is breaking down by kids with disabilities or kids that have an IEP, which is a individual education plan. So African-American females are up to 16.7%. Males are up to 20.6%, which is a lot. And then white females are at 5.3 and white males are at 9.5. And then we also have Asian and Hispanic documented here. All right, so PBS long-term suspensions and expulsions. So 30 students suspended for 4 to 10 days. And then 109 students expelled or out of school for 11 days or more. Other exclusionary discipline. So this data is not on the Pittsburgh Public Schools website. So in school suspensions, it is reported to the state in the Office of Civil Rights, but it's not reported. It's not transparent data on the Pittsburgh Public Schools website. Summary citations, adult criminal justice system, arrests, and juvenile justice system. Those are also, now there was a policy passed about 2 years ago, or a year ago, maybe, where we are going to start being transparent with that data. It has not happened yet. But again, these things are reported to the state, but they are not documented on the local school district website. Here's some of our recommendations. So, the work that we do with the school board and the district is we trying to come up with solutions and things that we can do different. So we want to invest in adequate staff and appropriate interventions to prevent infractions. So that could mean actually having real restorative practices and programming and curriculum. We can hire school climate coordinators, right? So somebody's whole job is to think about the culture and the dynamics and the climate of the school. Expand the suspension ban for nonviolent infractions to the 5th grade. We're only at the 2nd grade now, but I don't consider any elementary school student violence. And they should not be pushed away from their education just because they're little kids, right? And so public reporting of in-school suspension, calls to police, citations, and arrests to monitor for discrimination, and eventually removing police from schools. And I know that that is a hard thing to think about, but if you look at the data, that our school district arrests or issues and arrests more citations to young Black girls than any other school district in the state of Pennsylvania. So clearly we're doing something wrong. And we're not saying that we want to remove security guards. That's fine. They actually can use some training as well. But as far as police continuing to kind of introduce children to the juvenile justice system, like that has to end. And so the only way that we think to do that is just to get them to stop. And if we can't get them to stop, we would like to have police-free schools. And we think about how much money we spend on school safety in Pittsburgh Public Schools. If we were actually to divest some of those resources and put them into programming, and we're not making it up, people are doing this stuff all over the country in different school districts. And we actually can just, pick a model, or we can try something different. We shouldn't just go straight to criminalizing or harming children. We should, more move towards educating with love. And I think, and last, let's start last slide. If folks want to get involved in our work, we are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Our website is 412justice.org. We have monthly community meetings where we do deep dives into education policy and talk to families and community members around what's happening in Pittsburgh Public Schools.
Thank you so much, Angel. And just a very important reminder about the ways in which having law enforcement in schools is directly correlated to exclusionary discipline and the push-out policies that you mentioned. One quick question before we shift over to Dr. Leisha Lentz. I had a question about restorative practices that you mentioned towards the end, because I think people use that term very loosely. What are we actually calling for with that?
So, I mean, there's different models that people utilize, but I think actually having a staff person whose whole job it is to build relationships, to teach de-escalation, to think about how do we, come up with solutions that are not suspension, that are not missing class time, and actually restoring and repairing relationships. And that could be somebody's whole job. So, I know some people do, healing circles in different school districts, or I know that there's cool down rooms for staff and or students that need a moment, right? We actually can start following kids' IEPs and reading them and giving them access to real services. So there's just so many different things that we can try and do, but it has to be funded. And it has to be supported and it has to be respected. So, that's what I talk about when I talk about restorative practices. But, I have friends in the Oakland School District that are doing amazing work around restorative curriculum. I know people that are doing it in Newark, New Jersey. So it's just it's not a foreign thing. We can't talk, it can't be in a name only. It has to actually have metrics and, people actually have to, to follow the script.
Thank you, Angel. And Angel will stick around with us because folks may have questions. Please begin to drop those in the chat or in the Q&A box. But next, we're going to go over to Leisha because as Angel mentioned, we need supports. So talk to us about your role, about the AIU, and I understand you also have slides to share with us today.
Sure. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for inviting me, and good to see so many familiar faces. So yeah, my name is Leisha Lentz. I'm currently the Director of Alternative Education for the Allegheny Intermediate Unit. So the AIU intermediate units, there's about 28 of them across the state. The AIU services what we say the 42 suburban school districts in Allegheny County, because Pittsburgh Public is their own intermediate unit. And basically what intermediate units are and do is we are intermediaries, for lack of a better word, between school districts and PDE. We offer a variety of services. I work in the Early Childhood, Family, and Community Services Division. So that's why Alternative Ed sits with me, but we also have special education schools. We have a teaching and learning division that supports the local school districts in Allegheny County. So alternative ed, like right now I am in McKees Rocks at one of our alternative ed schools. They are under AEDY, so Alternative Ed for Disruptive Youth. It's regs in the state code. Usually kiddos are with us for 45 days and it's a behavior placement. However, if kiddos are expelled, they can serve out their expulsion here. The whole goal is to reintegrate you back into your sending school district. And then I also supervise the education for the juveniles incarcerated as adults at the Allegheny County Jail. Currently, we have about 20 youth in the jail charged as adults, and they are charged with homicide, attempted homicide, aggravated assault, usually with a weapon, and also rape, things like that. So I want to make sure that people don't think because Schumann closed, kids just went to the jail. You have to be charged as an adult, and these are your high-end crimes. So most of the kids at the county jail are in there for homicide-related charges. So I'm here to talk a little bit about restorative practices, which is a nice segue from Miss Angel. And I've been a restorative practice. It's been my passion for almost a decade now. And the work that I did previously, I actually had my colleagues who run the restorative work out of the Oakland Unified School District. They were here 2 weeks ago in Pittsburgh at the IU, and they were training my staff, and we also trained a few school districts in the work. And so I was really introduced to it when we were revamping the code of conduct. I spent about a decade of my career in the Woodland Hills School District. And so when we were revamping the code of conduct, restorative practices was something that was embedded in. I will say this, it's not a book. It's not Angel, it's not a curriculum. It's a mindset. It's changing hearts and minds, and it's what we need to do to build community. What is lost in Allegheny County, in my opinion, is a sense of community. And there's a lot of different factors that go into that. And we don't have enough time, and that soapbox is too high for me to climb on today, right? But I just wanted to talk to you. I have 7 slides just to kind of show you a little bit about restorative practices. And many of you on the call, I've sat in circle with you. I facilitated some trainings with you, and I am definitely available to do that, to kind of start the conversation on what it looks like in school districts, but also what it looks like in community organizations, and how we really start to approach kids and families and community with a restorative mindset. So I'm not going to bore you, and I'm going to go through it super quick because I know that there are other people that want to that have some information to share for you. So real quickly, guys, when we're looking at restorative practices, it really comes from indigenous traditions and cultures, where we are community, and we sit in circle, and you address harm, and you provide accountability and healing. And so I just pulled this and just to kind of ground our thinking. It did enter contemporary society in the 70s with the adult justice system to address harm within communities when people were transitioning out of incarceration, right? But when you really look at restorative practices, you look at kind of some guiding questions. And those first ones are, first of all, who's been hurt, right? What has happened here? What are their needs, and whose obligations are these? For lack of better terms, when you kind of talk about that victim offender dialogue, but don't think of victim offender and crime. Think of it like when you hurt somebody, right? So, but really what happens when you do RJ correctly, restorative justice, restorative practices, however we're going to frame it, it is very inclusive, and it's responsibility and relationship building. So everything that Angel was talking about, you really have to go through and do it that way. So when you look at the philosophy, we all lay here, and don't say we don't as a society. We are punitive. It is what was broken, who did it, what's the punishment? That's what we do. That's how our systems are set up. Is it right? Absolutely not. When you look at it in a restorative framework, it is what was the harm caused? What are the needs of both parties, right? What are the obligations to repair and heal? And what process shall we use? And so it's really shifting your thinking. So people were like, Leisha, you can't change hearts and minds. I'm like, well, I'm going to try, right? So it really is shifting our thinking of not just looking at what happened, but why it happened. And so when we look at it in schools and in other approaches, and those educators on the call, you know, we like to tier things out, right? So we have our MTSS, our triangle, same thing. A lot of this information I've pulled from the Oakland Unified School District. Those are my people. I was out there about 5 years ago, and I'm always in constant communication with them because they are doing the work. But I will tell you, they've been doing the work 12 years in the district, but it started as a grassroots project 20 years ago. So it won't change overnight, because it really has to do with climate and culture of the building. Because think about it, you want to be restored back to something you love. If you love your community, if you love your school, right, then you don't want to do anything to harm it. You want to, you know, that's a sacred space, and kids need that and appreciate it, right? And so when you're looking at that tiered approach, that tier 1 is the community building. That really is, every teacher in America can run community circles in their schools. I'm doing a community circle tomorrow with people that are doing some SEL work in school districts. I sit in circle all the time. And it really is to build community. It can be very lighthearted, but then you can address some heavy topics when you're in there, because when you have the foundation of a community, you have a foundation of trust. That tier 2 is that intervention or repair, that restorative discipline, the alternatives to suspensions. And then that tier 3 support is reentry. And I hate using words like that. So I'm going to say welcoming, right? When you're welcoming somebody back into the school community. So it could be if a kiddo was incarcerated, if there was a long suspension, any new student, a student that was truant, like they weren't coming to school, and now we've done the work to get them back to school. So welcome them in and give them the targeted supports that they need. So here's just the triangle for all of you out there that are used to things being tiered and leveled out. And this is from Oakland, but it really is that community building, all of the kids, that restorative discipline, the kiddos that need it, the healing, that type of thing. And then the reentry piece, right, or the welcoming, that one-on-one tiered support for our kids. This is probably the most important slide. So it really is the restorative questions, and there's many iterations of this. If you Google restorative questions, you're going to find something like this, right? But really, we're really good at 1 and 2, right? Like, what happened? Right? And what were you thinking? But if we really want to get to the root cause that Angel was talking about, you have to really dive a little deeper when you're talking with kids and families, right? Anybody that's been hurt. So what have you thought about since? Who has been affected by what happened and how? What about this has been hardest for you? And remember, guys, these are for both parties, right? So the person that has been harmed and the person that did the harm, right? And then what do you think needs to be done to make things as right as possible? This right here is accountability. Accountability and punishment are 2 totally different things. Accountability makes you change your behavior, right? And so if we're really talking about being in community, and if we're talking about having kids change behavior, right? Knowing that you don't want to disrupt our community, and understanding that a community is a sacred space, you have to dig down deep and get to the root of the problem, of the behavior, of why the harm was caused. And I don't think this is for the little ones, although I like it better for me because I think I'm elementary in my brain, even though I only ever taught high school. But they have this for the little ones, right? So, and I know we were talking about earlier the suspension ban, and like kiddos are fine with this, right? So you have that warm conversation where what happened, who has been affected, how do I repair things, how do I move forward and not do it again, right? And just a last point I want to make, that's just my information. Email me, call me, text me. This is what I love to do because I'm trying to work myself out of a job, right? I don't want kids in alt ed anymore. I don't want juveniles at the county jail in there for homicide. So I think that, is this a silver bullet? No. But is this a way for us to get to a point where we have a greater global community? 100%. And that's what we need to do. But to Angel's point, when we did this and we did this well, We did have a restorative practices facilitator. We had a partnership with the University of Pittsburgh with Dr. Jay Hughley, and I know many of you know him. And so we had a coordinator. And then the other piece of this that is vital that you can get to, right? And I can for sure walk anyone through this process, is you have a student leadership group. And you identify leaders in the school, and you all know your leaders aren't your high flyers all the time. Your leaders are the people that have influence, and you give them this ability, and they can run the circles, and they take their school back, right? We have to give our schools back to our kids because it is their space, it is their community. So that's all I have. I know I talked a lot because see, I get on this and I keep talking, so I'm gonna stop talking.
We love it, Alicia. Thank you so much. And for folks who are just joining us, just to provide a through line here, what Angel did was really set the stage with the data and how much of an issue suspensions continue to be and exclusionary disciplinary practices writ large. And then what we heard from Dr. Lentz is this idea that restorative practices can be used as one of the possible antidotes to help solve that problem. So just a follow up for you, Alicia, because culture was mentioned twice. You mentioned it as well as Angel. If I am, let's say, a classroom teacher who doesn't have a whole bunch of power outside of my classroom, and I'm just feeling overwhelmed with day-to-day responsibilities, where do I start with some of this?
I mean, I think the first thing you do is you get to know your kids, right? You get to know your kids and you get to know their families, and you begin to build that trust. And when you have a culture of trust and the kids know that you love them, right? And know that you have their back, they will walk through fire for you, right? And so any teacher, let's get back to being human, right? And just start to love each other and show that to our kids. And when you love them, and I see in the chat, and you keep them safe, yeah, like they're gonna wanna, you have to create a safe space. So you could do that with building community with circles, listening to kids, and making relationships with their parents too. Because that's vital. We have to do better and be better with the family and community connection with schools.
For sure. Thank you. And I see you have a question in the chat, but I'm going to go to Principal Morris first, and then I'll hop back over to you, Alicia. So we have Principal Candy Morris with us in the virtual building. I'm going to ask that you introduce yourself and say a little bit about your role at East Allegheny.
Hi, everybody. My name's Candy Morris. I'm the principal at East Allegheny High School. This is my second year here, having hit the ground running last year, being hired a week before school started. It's been a fascinating journey these 2 years, but we've been able to make a lot of progress. I'm here to talk today about positive behavior interventions and supports, and just share a little bit about that with my experience, which expands beyond this school. I've been doing PBIS in different venues throughout my career. This is the 29th year of my career, which is hard to believe. Time flies. So, but PBIS, and back in the day we called it SW PBIS, school-wide positive behavior interventions and supports, has been around a long time, but did not necessarily start in Pennsylvania, but there is a huge push, and it's very well known across the education spectrum throughout the Commonwealth and across the country. So I do have a few slides to share as well, just to keep me on point. I don't talk as much as Dr. Lentz, but I'm pretty close.
Please do. Thank you very much.
Now I'm going to have to try this again, or I'm just going to have to talk off the cuff. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Either
Okay.
one.
Let me try again.
Take your time. I think you're good now, Candy. But we have to unmute yourself.
we go.
There you go.
All right, how about that? Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.
All right, good. So like I said, I've been in administration for about 10 years. I met Dr. Lentz back in the day at Woodland Hills. But before that, I was at Wilkinsburg. I've been at Woodland Hills, Baldwin, and now back here to East Allegheny High School. But I've been doing PBIS even as a classroom teacher. I was on I think I was on every committee, but I was on the committee to bring PBIS into our school. And I think one thing that I need to say about any initiative that comes into a school, because it is, again, an initiative, a change, you've already got an established culture. It really takes planning on the forefront to get buy-in from your faculty and staff. If you don't get about 80 to 85% buy-in from the beginning, it's difficult to have it implemented with fidelity. And that is one of the most important things about any initiative that you put into a school. So those of you who are educators know about the multi-tiered systems of supports and how that reaches into academics, SEL, and behavior. So we're looking at the behavior part of this umbrella that kind of envelops everything that we're doing to support kids in schools. Just like Dr. Lentz said, this is also a 3-tiered model. Tier 1, we think of as this is what everybody gets. This is what we have embedded in our curriculum, whether it is SEL, things that we've got weaved through our curriculum, everything that everybody has access to, the lessons that kids are taught, and I'll talk about that in a little bit here. Everything that everybody comes into contact with, most of your kids can live in this level and respond to just the environment that's already established in the systems that are in place. So that's all kids get those. Some kids don't respond to tier 1, universal things that are in place, but may need a quick little check-in, check-out. They might need to develop a positive adult relationship that is intentional, that they get kind of paired up with a mentor. They may need opportunities to take a break for a variety of reasons, but you're looking at really supporting the kid at the next level so that they can also have the system affect their behavior in a positive way. Tier 3, you have a few kids at this point, right? And I know that there are people out there that argue that our triangles are somewhat upside down these days. And that, again, is a conversation for another time. But at this point, you've got a young person that hasn't really subscribed to all of the tier 1 universal supports that are there, nor the tier 2, and they need a little more individualized attention based on, where they're at, what is their why are the behaviors manifesting, and really getting to the bottom of that and determining, possibly through the student assistance program, what could be the best intervention for addressing that behavior. There may be an FBA, which is a functional behavior assessment, to determine what can we see as the antecedent to this behavior manifestation, because as we all know, all behavior has a reason. We just have to have the tools and take the time to find out what it is. So with that being said, this is actually the East Allegheny matrix for PBIS in this space. The elementary school, I'm not sure how they diverge from each other, but they are the acronym PROUD, and the high school is PRIDE. This was in place before I got here. When I was a teacher, we had the 3 Bs: be kind, be safe, be responsible. It really does take me a minute to remember preparation, respect, integrity, dedication, and excellence. But what you do with PBIS fundamentally is, along with a student advisory team, similar to restorative practices, you have those students help inform you and your nucleus of faculty that are working on addressing what do these things look like in these spaces in our school. So, preparation, what's that look like? And they had healthy habits born from COVID, and what did that look like inside each one of these words that describe the expectations in the space. Hallway, preparation means follow the dress code, have a pass, utilize your locker, respect, maintain physical distancing. So these all were carefully thought out and worded in a positive way. So instead of saying, don't run, say, we walk in the hallway. So there's also intentionality with how these things are stated. Now, just having a matrix isn't all that you do, because this all has to be communicated and become common language in the building. For example, as a teacher doing be kind, be safe, be responsible, that catchphrase was at the end of every announcement that was done every day. So there are BOQs, which are called benchmarks of quality, as your journey toward fidelity is taking place within your school, and it does not take place overnight. You have to make PBIS fit your space. But those BOQs, one of them is that whenever a student, a faculty member, a staff member is interviewed and they say, hey, what's your PBIS mantra? Like, what do you guys have here? What's going on? If a student or a faculty member can't say, be kind, be safe, be responsible, then that's a clue that this really hasn't become embedded in the culture yet. So you see all these expectations in all these different spaces in the school that align with the PRIDE acronym for all of the things that the team came up with, I think it was 2 years ago, as far as what do they think is important for our kids here at East Allegheny High School. These things aren't taken for granted as far as every kid knows what it means to be on time. So the student liaison team, along with the advisory faculty team, develop lessons, and those lessons then are actually taught to the student body. We are fortunate here that we were able to build in a 30-minute period called Pride Period here. And so during that Pride period, a lot of things live there. So during Pride period, we can teach these lessons. We can do Smart Futures, which is how we help support our Chapter 158 for graduation. We can do our Character Strong supplemental for developing more social emotional support. So there's a lot of things that live here, but this gives us a nice space so that all students are accessible at the same time to learn what does it mean to be on time to class, because my on time sometimes is 15 minutes late. And I know we're supposed to live by the early is on time, but I would lie if I didn't say I didn't get a text message at 1:58 to make sure that I was hopping onto this webinar. So defining what on time looks like so that everybody has common language of what that expectation is really important, because a kid may think that they're on time by their definition, but on time based on what the community expectation is. But again, that needs to be taught. The kids need to know that in this space, that this is what that looks like. So they have a lot of fun with it. In some districts, we're not really there yet with our student liaison team, but they actually make little videos. They poke fun at. Sometimes teachers act like kids. So you take a positive, fun way to kind of approach this as the community norms in this space. So one of the things that we shared with our staff, because again, just as we've been talking about here, there's more of a punitive mindset. I think of that as like the traditional mindset, unfortunately. But if you read through this, if a child doesn't know how to read, we teach them how to read. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach them how to swim. If they don't know how to multiply, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to drive, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to behave, we've been punishing. We're not teaching them what the expectation is for their behavior. So PBIS is an intentional mechanism for teaching the expectation. I mean, clearly in my mind, and I'm sure in your minds as well, we can't expect them to live up to what we think they should be doing if we don't tell them and teach them what that is. So I'm actually got another meeting on my schedule today for an upcoming conversation about discipline at the high school. Let's talk about discipline. I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. So I would love to think that that means, hey, how can we change behavior, right, in a positive way? But I already know in the back of my mind is, what are you going to do to these kids for X, Y, Z? So when you think about the definition of discipline, and you think of what comes to mind, like I was just talking about, sometimes, our knee jerk is, punishment, punitive. How do you change that behavior in a punitive way? But inappropriate behavior, and I tell kids this all the time. I think I had 10 conversations about this today. This is my 11th intersection with humans today. But when they have inappropriate behavior, and I expect them to because they're kids, because they're 12 to 20 years old in this space often, I don't escalate. I don't worry about, any kind of punitive outcome if we don't have to. Obviously, there are situations that do have to end in that way based on the law. But as far as having a teachable moment, right? And being able to have kids analyze their behavior, much like we were talking about with restorative practices. The purpose of a referral form isn't to request punitive discipline, exclusion. The purpose of a referral form is to have a teachable moment with whatever mechanism works with that particular kid to change the behavior. That's unfortunately, not the common definition of discipline, but discipline does not have to be punitive. It just needs to change behavior. So with PBIS, and this is sometimes very controversial when you're trying to implement PBIS in a school system, in a school community, is that there is an acknowledgement system. And trust me, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today if my acknowledgement system wasn't deposited into my bank account every 2 weeks on Friday. But with kids, before they're extrinsically motivated right now, a lot of them. Intrinsically means they're just doing it because they know it's the right thing to do. But until they're able to make that transition into knowing that, hey, I'm just doing this because I know what I was supposed to do, when we teach that behavior, and part of PBIS is you utilize data. So in that matrix, and if you're using what they call Swiss, or you're using your own data analysis, spreadsheets, whatever, you're able to identify at what time of day, in what space, what is the behavior, and what can we focus on for next month to change that behavior and minimize those behaviors. So what you're doing is, after you teach an expectation in a space, after you've targeted and identified that's a space we need to address, then you incentivize the correct behavior. In this space, teachers submit a Google form of students that have been displaying the desired behavior that's been communicated to them. Right now, I think that can be done better, but that's what's in place right now. So they complete this weekly Google form, and then students are called down and recognized and told what the behavior was that they're being recognized for. Just to recognize a student for the sake of recognizing them does not connect with, hey, you're getting an incentive. And here we use just like makerspace, things that we've made, whether they're Chromebook covers, coffee mugs that are personalized, pencils, whatever we have available or can scrape up, because this can be or should be a budget item, a line item in a budget, because it can become a little bit costly. But I have a resource here at the end where you can kind of pop in and find some free ideas for how you can extrinsically reward and acknowledge kids for the correct behavior in school. So I always get, some questions like this, there's too many referrals in the classrooms, there's too many in the cafeteria, but at the end of the day, are we digging down and asking the whys? Which classrooms, which grades? When you piece out this data with PBIS using the appropriate data analysis tools, you're able to see which classrooms, you're able to see which grades, you're able to then ask the questions like, why is this happening with them, right? Digging down into the why. Which students? Is it a particular group of students? Do they have something in common? Is there something that happened and affected their behavior? Is there a common denominator? So, the time of day, is this right after lunch? Is this before dismissal? And then you can target behaviors during that time that are taking place by then, like I said, incentivizing the behavior that matches the matrix, which should be common language in the school by then.
Candy, I'm going to just jump in for a second, because we are all eating up this presentation, and I think there is a part 2 that's here for sure. But for the sake of time, I'm going to ask for you to give us a quick conclusion, and then I'm going to transfer over to Amanda, because I'm sure we have questions in the chat as well.
Okay, so quick conclusion is, part 2 next time we'll be talking about what is a office discipline referral versus a teacher managed referral. And that's where this flow chart will come in, because we really want to empower teachers to have that management in their class and not pass that power on to administration. We're happy to do what we need to do, but we can pick up with, what can be done before that, what should be done before that, to, as Dr. Len said, develop those relationships with families. And as I say, get the team together. Make sure that we're not playing divorced parents and one person's hearing something and the other person's hearing something else, and we don't have direct communication. So with that said, I'm too new here to really have the data that I'd like to have to be able to say, hey, this is how much it's affected or changed or improved our outcomes with exclusionary discipline. But that's the next step, is making sure that we have implemented PBIS with fidelity, that we've got the appropriate amount of buy-in with our staff, and that it's common language and the kids know what the expectations of behavior are, so that, you know, it becomes an embedded part of the culture and climate in the building.
Thank you so much. And before we transfer to Amanda, would you mind please dropping into the chat the resource that you mentioned to help to
Sure.
support those resources? Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'll copy those into there. I'm going to put in the PA PBIS, the nationwide PBIS, as well as a link to some resources that people could use to get started. And if anybody wants to know how to get started, it's super easy, especially if you're a school. You just contact the AIU. They have TACs there that would be happy to train your staff. I'm sure that probably most staffs have been trained with this, but if you have new onboarding that's going on and new teachers coming out of university, they may need to have a refresher or, you know, training themselves.
Thank you, Candy, and good luck with your new role, new-ish role. All right, so Amanda, the convener of our Black Girls Equity Alliance work group all around education, please let us know a bit about your background and also the work of the BGEA.
Yeah, thanks to Shira. My name is Amanda Cross. I'm the Director of Research and Evaluation at the Office of Child Development. So we're involved in evaluations of child and family serving agencies, including a lot of schools in and around Allegheny County. And I've also been the co-convener of the education work group. And today I'm going to cover some of the advocacy areas that across work groups. So the Black Girls Equity Alliance has 4 work groups, and the work groups that really focus on school discipline are health and wellness, juvenile justice, and the education work group. So these advocacy areas that I'll share in just a second across all those groups. Let me see. This. So these are kind of the advocacy areas for equitable and anti-exclusionary policies. If you all can see me, because I don't think I can see you anymore.
But we can see, I mean, we can
Okay.
see the slides and we can see you on the side.
Okay, great. So the first of these issues are related to, I have windows open here that are blocking part of my screen. I'm sorry. Can't read my own slide. That are related to training. So that's related to anti-bias training. We know that the reason that Black kids and Black girls in particular are often punished at disproportionate rates is because of teacher bias. We see that in harsher punishments for Black girls for the same behaviors that white girls also participate in and receive less punishment. And we know from research, even in the earliest years of education, that teachers are prone to look towards Black students when they expect somebody to misbehave. So they are hyper monitoring Black students for misbehavior and more likely to label non-problematic behavior as problematic. So training for teachers and understanding that bias and trying to undo some of that as it leads to harsher and disproportionate punishment for Black students in educational settings. Also training on trauma-informed practice. So that includes expanded therapy and mental health services for students that have experienced trauma in their backgrounds that may be manifesting itself in school conduct, and then also de-escalation approaches and awareness from staff so that they're not responding to a child's kind of emotional behaviors with punishment and escalation that ultimately lead to school exclusion. And then support for robust prevention of school-based sexual harassment. We know that sexual harassment, when we talk to girls in the region about their experiences at school and where they feel safe, they tell us about feeling unsafe because of sexual harassment. And that's coming from peers, but it does come from staff at school too. And it comes from experiences on the way to and from school, on the bus, on the walk to and from school. So, and on social media, in school-based relationships. So there's a lot there, but it leads to a lot of distress. And we know that staff is often not really willing to step in to protect girls in those cases. They can report harassment, physical and verbal harassment, and are kind of accustomed to being ignored. So as those girls are ignored by staff, they learn to defend themselves. Because they may be the only person that's going to be willing to do that, and then they can be excluded and punished for those self-defensive behaviors. So not only doing more to prevent sexual harassment in school, but also to be more sensitive to the dynamics in any kind of conflict about what was really happening, who was the aggressor, was there an aggressor and a victim in this scenario, and to try to unpack that, because often we're hearing that kids involved in a conflict will just be suspended with really no chance to defend themselves about or explain the circumstances that occurred and that led to that incident. And we're hearing from our girls that often they are defending themselves against somebody that has been harassing them over time. And then the second set of recommendations we have are for policies. So these are related to zero tolerance policies, which can lead to exclusion for a variety of sometimes seemingly logical things, such as bringing weapons or drugs to school. But the definition of what is a weapon, is it a nail clipper? Is it a pencil? Is it a nail file? Is it a rubber band? I mean, we're getting into a lot of really murky waters there. And so when we have zero tolerance policies related to weapon possession, for instance, it can lead to exclusions and increased exclusions for the most marginalized kids. So we do think that context matters in that case, and we need to advocate for reducing those policies. And we have seen a lot of progress towards that, but we have a lot farther to go. As Angel mentioned at the beginning of our session, ending suspensions for elementary schools, expanding within PPS, the suspension ban for K through 5, and then expanding those bans to other districts in the region outside of PPS. Restricting or eliminating the presence of police in schools, again, kind of following what we've already been talking about, that the presence of police in schools is related to elevated referrals of Black girls in particular. Their disproportionality rates are much higher than any other group to be referred to law enforcement, and these are mostly non-serious offenses. So that's only about a quarter of the offenses that are considered person offenses. The rest of them are not person offenses or non-serious offenses. And so we really have a lot of work to do there. And there has been a lot of progress there within PPS recently. So that's something to celebrate. We want to reform dress code policies that can needlessly exclude girls, and it's almost always girls, from school, and Black girls in particular. That these dress code policies vary across school districts, but can sometimes apply to hairstyles, skirt length, just very, very specific things about a person's dress. And we hear from a lot of Black girls that they feel really kind of demeaned, victimized themselves by being excluded because of what they're wearing. And then finally, transparency, that districts should be reporting exclusion data so that it can be manipulated by other researchers and verified and explored, but at the very least, disaggregated by student characteristics so that we're able to identify places where there's large disproportionalities. And then if everyone would like to, oh, and I did want to mention that a lot of these recommendations are included in this report that was released several years ago that has great information about the juvenile justice disparities related to school-based referrals. So I'm happy to send that around to folks if they're interested in looking at the full report. And then we will be having the all BGA meeting on April 20th from noon to 3 at Point Park for people that are interested in learning more about all of those topics and getting involved in any of those areas. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And it was really important to us that we ended with what we're fighting for, right? We don't want to sit in a space and just talk about all of the issues. It's just as important that we talk about what our recommendations are for change. I first, before we wrap up, want to say that you all are one of the brightest groups of people I've had the pleasure of being around in a long time. People are quoting neuroscience in the chat, just casually on a Wednesday. And so there's a lot of very, very good conversation going on around intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation and what really works as far as behavior change. So again, a conversation for another webinar that we definitely will get on the books during our 2023 series, She Matters. Thank you so much for that. But I want to go back up to a question that was posed by Melissa. Melissa, I probably won't be able to get to it in the chat because it's so full now. Can you just unmute yourself and ask the question if you don't mind?
Sure. I was just, when Leisha was talking, I was just thinking, I work more in a juvenile justice space, and often we're talking about restorative practices with an offender and a victim. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about, the inclusion of the broader community of the school or the broader community of a neighborhood or whatever as sort of the harmed party, because I think people sometimes kind of miss that, and that's an important part of the whole thing.
Yeah, and so I gave you like the abridged version, but like one of my slides, I'm going to read it to you. It says, the process addresses the root causes of harm, supports accountability for the offender, and promotes healing for the victim or victims, the offender, and the school and or community. And so that's the whole thing, because we know sometimes that when kiddos are escalated and when there's harm done, it reaches broader, right? They hurt themselves, they hurt somebody else, they hurt their family, they hurt their friends, they hurt their school community. So it's really about talking through kind of the harm, right? Like talking through what happened. For example, I work closely with Stowe Rocks just because I'm here in McKees Rocks, but we have a grant with them doing some violence prevention. And when they had, some school shootings, like I sent them restorative questions that were community based about what a school shooting was like, right? Which we all could use right now because this hoax created havoc today across the state, right? So it really is, if you have that foundation of a strong community, right, Melissa, then you're able to have those conversations a little bit more freer, and they're able to kind of hit a little different because it's coming from a place of trust, it's coming from a place of relationships, right? And so it really is, it's the whole community and giving people a voice. The one thing that I do want to talk about 30 seconds is when you're in circle, right? And when you're in community, all barriers are lifted. There's no hierarchy. I'm not in charge of you. I'm not your boss. We are peers and we are together in harmony and circle. When you really believe that and you kind of work through this process with that in mind, where there's no barriers and there's trust and communication and transparency, all of these things that we've been talking about, then you're able to heal better and deeper. And that's when you kind of have that accountability conversation and the healing. So yeah, and especially in juvenile justice space, as you know, we have to get people to understand that, harm it has a ripple effect. And we're harming ourselves too, and the integrity of our families. So yeah.
Well, and in the juvenile justice space, and maybe even school discipline, that the traditional or old school ways of thinking of things are themselves harmful.
Yes.
So you're creating like a very weird dynamic. I mean, it is still the law in Pennsylvania. The purpose of the juvenile justice system, a little bit broader than just restorative justice, but balanced and restorative justice is supposed to include a really strong restorative justice part. And in my personal opinion, I think that the state has kind of drifted away from that.
Well, we're not going to talk about that out loud, Melissa, are we? But we can talk about it off camera.
There's a lot more that could be done. I'll put it that way.
Melissa being the rabble rouser that she is. Thank you very much.
Hey, I'm retiring at the end of May. I can rabble
exactly.
all I want.
Like and scene. Thank you all so much.
Stir up trouble and go away.
Exactly. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I know I learned a lot. If you learned a lot, can you please give us a thumbs up just to show appreciation to our esteemed panelists? My big question that I will not ask, but I will ask folks to sit with is, how do we implement PBIS in these restorative practices in small ways and big ways starting today. We don't even have to wait until tomorrow, whether that's in school or in our out of school time programs. There's much work to be done, not just around exclusionary discipline, of course, but just in ensuring that our young people are in healthy and whole community. Community came up quite a few times today. And I want to end with a quote by Candy, who said, all behavior has a reason. We just need the tools and to take the time to figure it out. So our work is to create the tools and also to take the time to figure it out. Thank you all so much for joining us. We will see you on April 20th at the All BGEA meeting that will be held at Point Park University. You all have a wonderful day, and it's 3 p.m. on the dot. We did it. Happy hump day. All right. Y'all take good care.